All right, we're going to get started. So my name is Philip Galler. I'm the CTO of NEP Virtual Studios and one of the original founders of Lux Machina. And to my right, I've got Kris Murray, Barbara Ford Grant, and Wyatt Bartel. So do you guys want to introduce yourselves real briefly?
I'm Kris Murray. I'm the CTO of Lux Machina.
Barbara Ford Grant, President of Prism Stages.
And I'm Wyatt Bartel. I'm the Vice President of Production at Lux Machina.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about LED volume design, both from a volume perspective, production utilization, as well as machine room, rendering stacks, camera tracking technologies, and a handful of other things. One of the things that we've been working on at NEP is the launch of a new stage in Atlanta at Trilith Studios. And I'd like to actually start this off by asking Barbara, what makes Trilith special? What is the stage, and what does it mean to you and to the group?
This is the stage. You're looking at it behind me, and that is not a rendering. That's a picture of the actual stage. And I'll say the first thing that's incredibly awesome about it is these guys designed and built it with over a decade of experience and understanding about how to build volumes and how people have used them in the past and how filmmakers might want to try and break it in the future. So there's a lot of thought into the design and the configuration for versatility for different types of storytellers to come in and kind of imagine and build what they're looking for. What Prism stages are, this is the first of what's going to be a network of owner-operated stages that we're building in media hubs, actually on physical production lots where physical production's happening. We kind of see this as an extension of that practical production process.
Awesome. Kris, Wyatt, you guys were involved in the design of this. You want to tell me a little bit about that process? Why don't, Kris, you go first, and then Wyatt will throw to you.
So the design process, I think, for us kind of goes through a gamut of trying to identify constraints of the room, the space, the production needs. And I think we sort of spend a lot of time trying to work out what's best for how we engage with production or how we engage with these facilities and the technology. Yeah.
Yeah, for this stage in particular, we spent a lot of time looking at past productions that we've been requested to put massive LED and projection systems around, and tried to find the right size that can fit in the building, that we're not also chasing, the top 1% of sets that are, 200 feet wide. So we were trying to find a good middle ground of, what's a large scale volume that can handle really high quality major movie sets, but also leave enough space on the stage for all of the production needs, whether that's, hair and makeup, crafty, DIT, video village, grip and electric. There's still enough space left on our stage for all of those things to be comfortable and actually, be conducive for what a production needs to be, and maximizing the amount of volume space we have for the creatives to tell the story inside of that volume as well.
So can I, if I can, also ask a little bit about, specifically to you guys, what have you learned over the last decade in doing this? I mean, I think between, the work that's happened in the last 10 years, you probably collectively have designed 10 or 20 of these volumes at least, and then, I don't know, dozens of pop-ups of large scale. What have you learned, and how does it help Trilith? And then I think for Barbara, how is that going to enable a conversation with production about what can be done here that can't be done anywhere else?
Yeah, I think one of the big defining factors for me in the design process was flexibility and making sure that we were accommodating the needs of as many production requests in the past that we've had. So, you can make a choice for any particular production, in your first year that's probably going to be wrong by the fourth year that you're in operation. And so we tried to say, okay, we're going to make choices today, but any choice we make, whether it's how big is a ceiling pod, or how much can it tilt, or how big is the opening, trying to make sure that those answers are flexible as time goes on, so that, as the ever-changing needs of production show up, we can adapt with them. And so there's a lot of intricate design features that I think seem static, but when you think about them over the long term of the years, you'll realize that they're actually quite conducive for different styles of production to come in and be successful.
Yeah, I think a lot of thought went into the stability and consistency and being able to be repeatable, which is why we can do this at scale, why this is one of what's going to be a network of a lot of stages. I come from production, and on the production side, we really want to just get to executing and creating the show, but very often, in historically working in virtual production in particular, you're spending a lot of your time just figuring out how to get things to work. Do I have sync? Do I have the right frame rate playing back? Is the color look right? Does the tracking drift or not? And these are the sort of problems that are going to be solved before you walk in the door. And that's the intent there, is to really focus on the creative process, to create a place where people can really focus on just realizing their vision.
And then actually, for you, Kris, Wyatt mentioned ceiling pods. What's a ceiling pod? What are some of the specific features that this volume actually has that make it different than most of the others in the world?
Not robots. We have an automation system that controls a series of pods that are effectively arranged in a number pattern on a phone that allow us to control and craft the lighting, the environment. We can control the directionality that light is being placed on there. They can articulate in sort of any different ways. We also have sort of plug that encapsulates the whole. The opening of the volume that allows us to make a more cohesive lighting experience where we don't necessarily have a dark frontal patch. We hit that with light as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. So really, I think, and actually on the photo behind me, you guys can see some of these pods, right? There's 3 center areas and then 1 in the back. And I think, if I'm not wrong, Trilith has 9, right?
Yeah, there's more.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's basically a large fin that kind of encapsulates the space between the plug and the ceiling that can provide effectively some front sort of downlight. Gotcha. And then they really can all be arranged and connected together.
That's great.
I mean, you can imagine the ways that this can get used. It can be entirely flat and make one uniform piece out of all 9 pieces, and it can be lowered, and you could have stunt rigging and whatnot from above in there. You can shape it around a airplane or a train. It's really the point of it being incredibly versatile and also having independence of movement between the lights, the tracking, and the pods themselves to allow for the most versatility.
And you can actually see, so before you go on, I swapped the photo up here, and this is an image taken from the entrance of the volume. Shows off a handful of features, some of them a little more secret than others. But one of these is, you can see the 9 pods overhead and the fin that Kris was talking about. These are in their sort of home position. And I think one of the things that'd be cool to talk about is why would we do this? Why did we do this? Like, what was the reason, and what else can we do that this shows off that enables us to do more, hopefully better, stronger, faster in terms of work?
The ceiling is a big, it's a big expense, but it's also a really big benefit for production. Certainly, not everybody, has an environment where reflections are important, and so we decided to break that ceiling up into sections. So if you want to hang truss pieces in those channels of those grids, it's very easy to get access up to the steel beams and hang motor points, set pieces, stunt rigging, really you name it, in between them. As Barbara mentioned, you can fuse them together as well to create that giant homogeneous lighting surface. So if you do have car work, somebody in a suit of armor, something like that, where reflections are really important, we can also accommodate that. We can also drop a whole pod out. So if you want to hang a truly massive set piece or really intricate stunt rigging, whether it's the front section or the section in the back, we'll drop that whole thing onto giant casters and move that out of the stage and give the production designer, the flexibility they need. So, the ceiling is one really just truly amazing factor of this stage, but there's so many more that we can keep talking about.
Well, we'll touch on some of those, I think, in a second. One of the questions I think I have as well is, we talk a lot about, LED. Like, you'll hear everyone here talking about LED, and obviously a lot of trade shows about LED. But I think for us, the LED is only a small portion of what is the problem, right? There's also a problem with, rigging. We're talking about the pods. We're talking about how are people going to interface with lighting? What does the machine room look like? How do you deal with camera tracking? And what are some of the things you guys have learned about over the years that pertain to this as well?
Yeah, I think, Kris, if you want to talk a bit about color in the machine room, I'll start off with, We've got integrated lighting positions throughout the stage, so it's very easy for a production team to come in and utilize the stage as they traditionally would and let the technology flow around them. So Grip and Electric can walk on and very easily hang a 5K Airy, not have to worry about where they're going to figure out how to get points in there. There's a whole system that's built just for them to walk into, as well as, the LED is only about 2 millimeters off of the floor. And so production doesn't need to create a raised bed as you normally do in a lot of other virtual production volumes where the LED is sitting on a footer. So we've removed that footer from our stage and dropped the bottom pixel all the way to the concrete, basically. So you can roll in with a set piece and not need to spend a six-figure sum building 8,000, 9,000 square feet of wood or steel decking trying to raise your environment up to that digital, screen behind you. And so it really just keeps going. Kris, why don't you talk about the machine room and whatnot?
Yeah, so the machine room is kind of a modern marvel, I think. We've spent a lot of time engineering cooling, humidity, just trying to keep the machines running and humming in in a very stable place, in a great place. And we also value redundancy a lot. So we've designed the systems from a signal path and machine count to basically to be resilient to problems that a production might face, because we don't want to suffer for any amount of downtime. We want to be able to move to backup super quickly, and the team there is basically able to effectively swap over to spares, pushes a button without necessarily accounting for or creating dramatic amounts of downtime when problems do arise. And then as far as color science, I think it's something that's super important to us. We have a number of roles at Lux that are basically focused on this. We've worked very closely with Epic to get the color right, as Barbara was saying, so that we are doing what's right for production in the best way possible. We spend a lot of time effectively calibrating cameras specifically to the volume so that we have great pairs, or the pairs for our LED and the most common common camera manufacturers. And I think it basically puts us on the right foot from the starting point for production.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out there as well that it's not the push the magic button and a software system tries to calibrate it for you. We take a very scientific approach forwards and calibrate and profile with the spectrometer, what are the specific tiles we have, what are the characteristics of this particular camera coming onto set, what does the DP want the look to be, what are the questions that we need to ask each other about roll off and the toe of color, and what are those creative questions that are going to be influenced, because there are many questions in color that go beyond the does it look right. It gets to the question of, well, what do you want it to look like? And so we've got a whole pipeline for that that we bring to bear every day.
And I think, I'm not a panelist, but I'm going to contribute. I think the idea of color is a science till it's not, right? We have to be prepared to answer the scientific question, and then we have to be willing and able and understand how to help achieve the vision that someone has creatively. And I think, that combined with the understanding that this isn't a space just for filmmakers, it's a space for storytellers, and we have to enable them to tell that story.
Yes, and I think we also have to keep them from falling off the ledge as well, right? And so that's where all the experience comes into play, to understand how to guide best, because some of it's subjective, but they're subjective to the point it breaks.
Exactly, and actually, conveniently, my next question's for you, Barbara. So, as you're looking to bring in clients to the space, right? We're talking a lot about the features, and technology tends to get in the way of innovation in some cases, especially when we're looking at storytelling, right? The idea that technology isn't a transparent thing, but it's in our way. How do you communicate with people about, and prospective clients and storytellers, that they should come in and feel like they can tell the story they want to tell, but also highlight some of the things that are unique to the space? What is that? For lack of better words, what is the sell like? What is the pitch for this space, so that people know that technology's not going to hamper them, it's there to help them. Oh, and by the way, it does things that they may not be able to do anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most important questions, right? And we've talked about the thoughtfulness of the design. We've talked about a lot of the technology features and the thoughts that went into the stability and the resilience of the workflows and how things come together, and how we can help with those subjective technology problem-solving needs early on in a production, so that we're able to help them achieve their vision. I think the other thing that we do being in the position of not just popping up a stage and operating it for a project, but actually creating a facility that lives inside of a physical production environment, is that we have a team on the ground that is, and we actually have some of that team here. We've got our virtual production supervisor over there, Jason Davis, who are incredibly skilled and experienced in producing this kind of work to solve those problems in real time as productions are going, and that are connected to the larger environment. Because again, we're on a physical lot, so set pieces are being built at stages next door. Practical shots are happening on stages across the parking lot. And then this is really about building an ecosystem and plugging into an ecosystem that filmmakers can extend it and use it how they need inside their larger production plan.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think that's a great answer. I know one of the things we've all talked about is sort of this juxtaposition between, look at this technological marvel, but technology's not in your way here, right? And
don't trip over the cables.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and I think it's that sort of is a really unique approach. And I think that approach also, I'm going to go to you next, Kris, in terms of some of the software stuff. And I think, there's a handful of unique applications that are built into the stage, right, that enable things like more fluid control, not just for our own artists, but for guest artists and for people like Jason and the rest of the team in terms of navigating what is a really complex, like you said, modern marvel in terms of machine rooms. And I know, we've talked about this at length, which is, it's basically a media and entertainment data center combined with a broadcast truck, right? And that's a really complex thing. What kind of software is available through the Lux and Prism ecosystem on these stages? I understand you've got some control software that is pretty interesting.
Well, yeah. So I think I'll probably maybe back it up one step and say there's a lot of infrastructure that I think we've been holistically designing to solve these problems of production. So I think like the Lux Prism sort of infrastructure as a whole is tackling this sort of production problem. We have specific tool sets that enable us to be effective. One, we build a lot of plugins and tooling for Unreal or any of our sort of packages that we work with, but then we also write some of our own stuff ourselves. So one of them being Visual, effectively is a control system targeted for virtual production specifically and virtual production systems. So all the types of devices that we would normally want to interface to, we're writing software for them so that we can have effectively very simple controls for very complex systems that provide sort of a fluidity for the operators to be able to act to production requests, on a whim.
Oh, yeah, I sure do. A handful more photos here, guys. So I think it's really interesting. I think there's also some physical stuff, as I understand, that is made. Camera tracking wands, calibrators, that are sort of unique to the group that have enabled faster calibration. Can you guys talk about that a little bit and how it's helped the group?
Yeah, so we've fabricated a number of very lightweight and large calibration wands for volumes at this scale. It's something we've sort of had to do in order to facilitate productions at this scale. We also fabricate a number of calibration devices, or not necessarily calibration devices, but camera tracking devices that we can affix to props, set pieces, cameras, etc., for tracking things in the space.
Yeah, excellent. So Wyatt, I know we talked a little bit about some of the configurable elements of the ceiling. Are there and the low height of the floor? Are there any other features that are important to discuss, or anything that you as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, when you walk into the space, impact your idea of how you would be able to work and partner with others in the space?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the list just keeps going. We call it a plug. Some people call it a door. The closing of the volume that we have, the center section of that, the whole thing splits into 3 sections. So our center section can go all the way to the back end of the stage to create a nice flat screen if you want to use it for something else. The 2 side doors will also pivot open 45 degrees to create an opening that is as wide as the opening of the primary wall itself, so that we can fit in about a 35-foot set piece, left to right. So whether we want to put in, a plane buck or a train car, giant set piece, there's about 7,000, 8,000 square feet of usable space inside of this volume. The dimensions itself are about 85 by, I think, 70 by 30 feet tall, give or take. So it's truly a massive structure. And I think if you'll notice there on the right also, there's a a small photo of a little opening in the volume as well. So we can actually remove tiles from the center of the primary wall. So if you want to put lighting inside of the volume itself, inside the primary wall, stunt rigging, additional set pieces, do a tracking shot that punches through, get creative shots from a volume that you maybe haven't seen before at angles that are trying to push the boundary as we see. I think some set pieces ended up, as time goes on, we see a lot of the same motifs in a circle in some of these productions, and so we're trying to find ways to help the creatives break through what seems to be a trend and find new ways to tell their story and be innovative and unique in the space.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting perspective, right? 'Cause I think combined with the height, right, which is about 30 feet tall, the opportunity to, I think, move the plug out, move the fin, and angle the pods in a way that give you almost like long hallways, right? The ability to do really, really long tracking shots, even maybe a couple hundred feet.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning also that the motion capture rig that we have, we've got about 100 cameras up there. It's not only inside of the volume, it also extends outside into the entire opening. So if you want to put a really long lens on and open up that volume and do a 100mm lens and some really interesting dolly shot, we'll still track that, and you can just lay down the track on your camera and, spontaneously, or, hopefully with storyboards, let's caveat, but, we can achieve that shot very easily without having to create some whole custom setup, just trying to figure out where the creative wants to put a camera. So, as I talked about the flexibility, what you choose for one production will need to be very different than what you choose for another. And so we've tried to look across the range of what have we done in the past and what do we see trends moving in the future, and make sure that we can respond very quickly to those needs, whether it's swapping to a backup, moving giant volumes of LED both in and out as a ceiling, or the door opening, what have you. It's all about being able to cater to the needs of productions that are going to flow here for years.
Oh, in terms of facility design, you hit on this a little bit earlier. Facility design being very different than volume design. We're talking a lot about volume design here, but I think there's a question of how do you choose a place like Trilith? How do you what's important about it? Why is it the right place for a facility like this that can handle productions where they are telling massive stories?
I think it has everything to do with our approach. It's just kind of I was listening to what Wyatt was saying, going off this idea that you can do all of these different things, and that they may or may not be that entire sequence, right? It could be that you're doing your wide shot that has a ton of stunt work in it on a effects pad, and then you're going to do medium and smaller intimate shots on a volume stage. You could very easily imagine you build an environment that is the one for the stage that is also what's used for the compositing and post-production on those shots. So when we think about it, there's a couple of things about it. So in terms of the location being at Trilith, and we've got some Trilith friends here today. Obviously Atlanta is the largest film production hub in the United States. It's a wonderful place to shoot. Trilith is the largest, most state-of-the-art stage, so we're very happy to be in partnership with them. It's an ecosystem. It's not just sound stages. It's an entire ecosystem. There are people who have moved their families and have been there for 10 years, since Ant-Man, I think. And we love that we have access to this larger film ecosystem, and likewise, we're an extension, as I mentioned earlier, of the physical production and everything else that they offer. So it's just a partnership that made absolute sense. And there's also nearby other stages I should mention that, there's Black Hall and Tyler Perry. It's just a great hub for production. In terms of being a facility, we're really focused on being that framework for doing this kind of work in the most resilient and thoughtfully designed way. And so in that sense, we're a little different than my previous history or a visual effects company where you're kind of popping some. Usually it's on the heels of a show you're doing, or it's that you want to facilitate some amount of volume work as an extension of shot work or asset build work that you're already doing. We really can work with anyone on either end of the pipeline, from art directors and VAD asset builders all the way through to the final, handing off to turnovers to shot production to visual effects houses. And while we're Unreal today, we are open to, we have the ability to be agnostic on almost any front from a technology perspective, because at the end of the day, what we're really focused on is state-of-the-art facilities with the best in breed in terms of production services.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I think why I'm sure you'll expand on this a little bit, that it's not a place just for real time, right? It's a place for telling your story, whether it's real time or maybe even practical. But I think more, hopefully, real time, pre-rendered workflows, 2D, 2.5D, 3D. I think Wyatt and Kris, certainly, maybe you guys can expand a little bit more on what this means. And I know, Wyatt, you were probably about to say something, but I'd love to hear about that as well.
Yeah, just to tack on real fast, I think it's important to mention that, we're on stage 22 at Trilith. There's 23 stages total right now, so I think that number alone really goes to show you the footprint of available production space that is around us, that is able to cater to the truly the biggest shows that you can think of that have been made in Atlanta and are top box grossing hits now. So I think that's a nice talking point. Going back to what types of production can we cater to. It's very true. Not everybody needs a fully real-time environment. Sometimes we want to just do an HDRI plate photography session. We can extend that very rapidly into a 2.5D concept, which goes all the way back to the 40s with Disney and the multiplane concepts. So, that technique is still well alive. It's just been supercharged with camera tracking technology, those render engines, but it's also very accessible to the needs and capability of some productions. And so it was important for us to cater not only to how, the larger scale production that wants to do a full 3D environment, but we also wanted to make sure that we could say, sure, if you've got an HDRI or a big Panosphere or just a good shot, we can just do, a quick pickup there and get you in and out very quickly without needing to spin up a massive, visual effects team or virtual art department team, or try to figure out how we're going to digitize some entire 3D city. So it's a very flexible solution that we've made.
But if you happen to be there and have an itch to bring something down off a marketplace and you want to use it on set, we can probably figure that out for you too.
Yeah, I think really the possibilities are unlimited, right? So as Barbara pointed out, we've got some of the team here today. So Jason is our supervisor. He's here. There's a picture of him behind us. And I think one of the things that's really cool about this space, I think for me, is that it's not just about the physicality, right? It's about the team that's there. It's about the knowledge they have. It's about the support ecosystem, both in hardware, but also in software and in actual filmmaking, right? I mean, everyone who is in the space and has been graced, I think, with the space and been involved in the creation of it comes from a place where they've been involved in this workflow through its many names over the last 10 to 15 years, and in some cases even beyond. I mean, Jason, although he's not up here, has been a key part of that. And I think in terms of the team, I think just to lay out what's there, I think, we've got camera tracking, we've got, engine operators, TDs who can help with software support. Would you guys be able to tell me a little bit about what that team makeup is like and what's so helpful in having that team there full-time to support productions? Maybe, Barbara, maybe you could start with that,
Yeah,
and Kris and Mike could add in.
I'll start with, they were very intentionally brought on as full-time staff versus, what you would normally do where you're crewing for a show, to build not only a team, but a culture for the facility itself. That, this is a cohesive group of individuals come from a myriad of talent working in various aspects of virtual production who are there to sort of help not just keep it operational, but continue to refine and define what it is in the future. There's, there's obviously, as you mentioned, there's the virtual production supervision, which is really about just everything on the stage itself, ensuring that we're making it going. There's engine operation, which is real-time operation of the engine, but it's also the plates and the panospheres and all the other things. They're really media to the rendering, to the volume itself. There's tracking, motion tracking, largely focused on tracking the camera, but can track other objects. Kris mentioned some tools we have for tracking props and other objects. And then we have a tools group, everything from the tools on the set for the workflow for things happening in the Unreal Engine to how the machine room works and how it connects to, the entire back end, how we work with our other facilities and manage the software and the upgrades and the systems and the connectivity to different VADs and production houses that we're engaging with.
And I think just to jump in real quick, little plug, 11 a.m. Thursday, we will be here again talking about some of those tools, what makes it unique, some of the software, but also how you interact with supervisors between visual effects and virtual production, and a couple of our team members, Jason Baver and Kris and Turnipseed and myself will be up here talking about that. So come back on Thursday. But sorry, Kris, after you, talk about some of the tools.
I just wanted to tack on to Barbara a little bit in that the team there is great and really important, but it also doesn't stop at the walls of the stage. It extends into the rest of the ecosystem at Lux and Prism, and there's a talent of resources across the entire business that can be leveraged to support those productions there.
Because I see Steve May in the audience, I'm going to plug this. Also, we talk about being interoperable with different workflows and different technologies. Part of it is also being part of the larger filmmaking community. And there's a lot of work going around standards in asset building and asset workflows. And, it's very much been on the animation into visual effects side. But these are the same people who are part of the VADs, who are building content for us that are going to go onto the stage and very likely also going back into a post-production workflow. So we're also very much keen on being a part of that larger community conversation of interoperability.
And I think with that, right, like as Barbara said, being part of that larger ecosystem, it's part of the Prism story, right, is that there are going to be a network of stages that facilitate productions of many scales. And Lux, as a business, continues to build pop-ups and staff and operate stages for studio clients globally. And that ecosystem requires standardization, interoperability between workflows. And I think, we're a great test case for being able to work with people in identifying and refining some of those processes. And it's what we do internally, and Kris and Wyatt, I can talk about this far more in depth than I can, but there's a fairly robust process in terms of we develop tools on shows. And those tools are, I think, we haven't really talked about them much yet, and we're going to do that again a little bit more Thursday. But some of those tools enable filmmakers to tell their story, but some of those are actually not for the storyteller in the space. They're for people to go into post, and for this to extend further into pre-production, into work and visualization on the front end. Do you guys want to give me a brief bit about that, each of you?
Oh, I guess I'm holding this. Yeah, I'm not sure where to start with that. I think that's a pretty wide topic, but yeah.
I'm going to give it to Wyatt. He has thoughts.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it's true. We do care a lot about our post handoff capabilities, whether it's scripts that we've built for motion capture data to strip out and only hand over the data that we need, or our ability to track the changes that we are making on the day. Some things can be captured in stuff like a CDL, a lot of stuff out of the Unreal Engine, or different plate softwares, things like that, is not easily tracked and handed off. And so, we don't want to just sit there with a production coordinator or a supervisor and somebody with a notepad. We want to try to automate some of that workflow to hand over that data so that we can very authoritatively say, scene 28, take 2, this is what our settings were, here's the metadata for how this came out, and hand that over to post. So if they want to do post integration for some visual effects shot, or as a colorist understand what changes were made as they try to balance the holistic shot. And then there's also innovative features that we've added in. We're just across the booth here from our good friends at Leica. We've integrated their technology, and so we've got a volumetric scan system that's built into our LED volume here. And so I think twice a second from one vantage point now, and hopefully N coming down the road, we can create a full capture of what the actual production was at the time. So not only what's coming out of the camera, and an HDRI shot, but you've also got depth data and reference and everything else that we can try to push that data through into the future.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, all that data, it's not new to collect that kind of data on set. VFX has been doing that a long time, but to be able to have it all gen locked and synced and packaged and delivered in a way that fits into the pipeline that people are used to receiving it in. That's the unique thing, is that we're really focused on, these are all the data sets that you'd want to have offset, knowing that you're going to take the OCFs and you're going to be doing some post-production visual effects. I mean, I know this is near and dear to Eric's heart. Weaver's been working a long time on all those. He's not even listening, but he spent a lot of time on plate naming and other things that help facilitate these kind of workflows. And there's plenty of work out there in the industry that allows us to help kind of leverage what's been going on in visual effects and bring it into the physical production context.
Well, and I think one thing that's really important to expand upon that in terms of the conversation is that, like, we talk about, this was an LED volume panel, but I think for us as a group, an LED volume is a tool, and we have to encompass all the other tools. And so when we're designing these things, we're designing them thinking through, where is that data going? How does it get used? Who's going to need to touch it? How does it get, fixed, corrected, adjusted, played with in post, or wherever it goes next, right? And acknowledging that, the volume is a tool that gets us to, ultimately be incorporated into the production. I think that's why when we talk about facilities, like, that is what a facility is, right? It's not just, I'm going to go shoot in the volume today. It's, no, I'm going to go to Trilith, and I'm going to go work at the Prism stage there, and I'm going to get to work with this amazing team of people who are able to also provide all this other stuff that goes into post and goes into pre-production.
I think another aspect of the tools that we focus on a lot is the saving time. Where are the pain points of production? What are people spending time trying to do so that we can optimize those out to provide more iteration cycles for the creatives? And I think that's a lot of our tooling actually is focused on that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm going to just ask one more round of questions here, and then we're going to do a little Q&A. So, I think, Barbara, we talk about facility design and volume design. Obviously, they're very different. But can you talk to me a little bit about, I think, what for you has set this experience? And I think, for those of you who don't know, Barbara is sort of new to our group. Kris and Wyatt and I have been working together for about a decade at Lux. And we were lucky enough to have Barbara join us in, I think, January, February, to help lead the charge on what we're doing at Prism, which has been really exciting for us. And I think, is there anything you can share about your previous experiences and then coming into this experience with us, and what you see now, what challenges are ahead, what needs to get fixed, and what direction you think we're headed in terms of being able to provide better services inside the LED volume for a myriad of clients?
Whew. I will do my best. That's a lot. So I joined in January, but not unfamiliar with the Lux folks and the history of great work that they had been doing and had been watching, and in fact had wearing a different hat, my academy hat. I had some exposure to the quality of the work that they had been doing. So I was very excited to have the opportunity to jump in on this side. I come from a very long history of being on the production side, so this is very interesting for me but making a lot of new innovations that got used in production. And if we were lucky, we could get maybe 1 or 2 movies out of it. And really super lucky, the facility would adopt it or the industry would adopt it. But by and large, we'd made things that were built up, kind of worked, kind of fixed in post, torn apart, and then you move on again. And so I would say, if I were to characterize the biggest opportunity coming in here, is like, wow, we can go into a field that I think, a lot of us are in this at all because we're interested in the art, storytelling, and technology intersection. And this is really the heart of that. And to be able to do that with, the resiliency and scale that we're looking to achieve with these stages, it's just an exciting opportunity to come in and do that. I don't know if I answered half of what you asked.
No, that's great. I mean, I think, absolutely. Thank you. And a similar question to Kris and Wyatt, which is, this is an iterative process. Obviously, you guys aren't new to the process. The stage at Trilith is another opportunity to learn lessons about what comes next. Do you want to go first, Wyatt, and tell me what lesson you've learned, what lessons have you guys learned, what challenges are there still to solve, and where do you see the future in the next couple of years with this type of work?
This is definitely our best foot forward into the industry with this stage. So hopefully I don't have many things to solve in the next one because we got it perfect, the first time round. But, we'll see what 3 years, comes down the road. But, outside of the physical design of the stage, I think there's a lot of integration that needs to be done with the industry, with the tool sets to engage with different virtual art departments, whether they're, internal here within our own company and, we're iterating through our own processes, or engaging with our external partners and our external productions and trying to figure out how are we offloading and onboarding and bringing loads to stage as quickly as possible, standardizing what does the documentation look like? What is a standard meeting of, hello, welcome to the stage, this is how you should try to think about using it in some successful ways, in ways that you can think of that might not be so great, and trying to help craft the narrative, not only for ourselves and the physicality of the stage, but for our partners out there, and trying to work with the ecosystem at large to really create a strong foundation, not only at our first stage at Trilith, but around the globe, and really hit at, whether you go to this facility or over here or to another partner, that we're not related to. I'd like to see our influence extend there so that there is a homogenous feeling as we go into these virtual production stages, and they don't feel like a hodgepodge of, technology where you trip over the cable, as you say, but there are consistent practices that we have all agreed to. And ICVFX is something that we as a company have been saying for a long time. That's now a standard tool. The virtual production supervisor is another term that is now synonymous. So I think you'll see those kind of concepts slowly evolving over time more and more, and we've got a lot of work to do together.
I just want to add really quick because I'm at the edge of my seat about this. One of the other things that we're keen on investing in is education and awareness about virtual production and the process. Beyond the roles and the technology, best practices. And I think an area, as well as like the more invisible the tech can get, I think the more, will lower the barrier to entry and the less scary it'll all seem. But there's also a ton of noise about how to go about this, right? So you can gain efficiencies. We're not going to be the ones who tell you that you're going to save money, but you can definitely, if it's done the right way and it's planned in the right way, you can gain efficiencies, which hopefully show up on the screen. The other thing is that we have to work, and I know this might not be the audience, but you can take it all back to your executives and have a conversation with them about it. It's thinking about how productions are planned. Those conversations that used to be like way down the road after the production was planned, and we're talking about the buckets of money going into visual effects, need to move up front and need to be bringing the DP on and the art director and having those conversations about what are we doing physically, what are we doing on a VFX pad, what are we going to do in a volume, what needs to be built when, and thinking about that from a shot planning phase from the very beginning. And we certainly can help with that process. There are other companies out there who can help with that process, but the point of it, the main thing is to start thinking about it from a planning and budgetary perspective, that you're going to start doing a lot more things in development than you used to do.
Great. Just to sort of tack on to what we were talking about earlier, I think some of the lessons that we've learned is engaging with the other departments on set. Like we've changed the shape of the wall to better support sound in the space. We've held space for lighting. We've held space for stunt rigging. We've tried to make this a place that collaboration can happen. And I think we're chasing a forever problem, which is towards greater flexibility, and that's something we're always going to be trying to do for the space or any of the spaces we inhabit.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.